What a treat to be here, to be with these two people. I'm going to be talking about compassion, just a little tiny bit about emotion. Near the end of my talk, I'll raise the question of whether compassion is an emotion. I won't tell you my answer to that yet, but most of the time I'm just going to be raising questions. So I hope you'll be patient with that. At this point, I'm actually more interested in the questions than in trying to come up with answers, because there are literally more than 100 questions about the nature of compassion, which if we knew the answers, we could move forward and increase the amount of what I'm most interested in, which is global compassion, compassion towards all human beings. Now, I am not a Buddhist. What I know about Buddhism comes from having the privilege to have spent nearly 60 hours in one-on-one conversations with the Dalai Lama in the last 10 years. And the ideas I'm going to be talking to you about today, I've discussed with both Matthew Ricard and Alan Wallace, two wonderful Buddhist scholars and teachers. I'm not going to say too much more about Darwin, although that shaped my outlook early in life and continues to. And I was amazed to discover Darwin's really humane view of human nature, very similar to the Buddhist view. He believed the highest virtue was to be concerned about all sentient beings, and he used that phrase, and he did not know Buddhist writings when he used that phrase. It startled the Dalai Lama. Did he really say sentient beings? Yes, he did. I actually had an article published in JAMA called Darwin's Humane View of Human Nature, and if you are interested in it, be glad to send it to you. Darwin also thought that the relationship between mother and infant was the model for compassion. Although he didn't use that phrase, that's what he was talking about. And of course, the Dalai Lama believes that's the seed of compassion. And if there is no mothering, if you have an organism that isn't raised by a parent, then you won't ever see compassion, is his hypothesis. So I'm going to just say, I can't resist saying at least one thing about emotion. And that is, there aren't positive and negative emotions. It's thought that amusement is a positive emotion, but if you've seen the Barack movies, you know that you can be very amused by humiliating other people. Is that positive? Maybe enjoyable, but it is humiliating for the object. And of course, anger can be a force for social justice. So I think the issue, and I think Richie and I agree about this at this point in time, we didn't always, is how the emotion, to use one of Richie's favorite terms, is instantiated. That is, how are you experiencing the emotion? And every emotion can be experienced in a constructive or a destructive fashion. And what's the criteria? The criteria, and this is one that the Dalai Lama and I came up with jointly, is that it furthers future collaboration, and that collaboration is of some benefit to the community. Then it's a constructive rather than destructive engagement. Now, when you begin to think about compassion, which is focused on suffering, one of the things that you discover is that people are talking about different kinds of suffering. Can you see that? I can't too easily. Physical pain or anguish, that's what we may immediately think of. But a lot of compassion training and writing is about a malaise, not about the physical pain, but sort of a general malaise. And then you get into the more strictly Buddhist view, you're dealing with a failure to really grasp the nature of interdependence, and that's the focus. So very different. They're all important. They're not the same. We need to know which one we're dealing with at the time. Now, compassion research and training not only differs in what kind of suffering it focuses upon, but also in the nature of the training itself. So you have different kinds of compassion. in terms of the training. And I presume you can all read that there's compassion that focuses on your feeling what the other person is feeling, at least to the extent that you actually can. We don't really know when I feel your pain, am I really feeling your pain, or am I feeling a version of your pain in the pain I feel? I don't know whether that really matters. The focus says in one kind of training that you'll feel what the other person is feeling. That's quite different than acting to relieve it. And that can be the focus. And that's quite different than that is focused on, if I can see it, concern. Now that's a lovely term. I'm concerned about how you're doing in life. I'm concerned about what happened to you yesterday. What is concern? If you look it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, it's a relative of fear. Is that what we really are trying to teach people? Is to worry more? I feel like I already worry enough. But concern is certainly a focus. And then you have the Buddhist view, which is really more of an aspiration. And I'm going to leave that alone, because I just barely think I grasp what they're talking about. So, one question we can raise is, are you feeling exactly what the other person is feeling? Must you feel the other person's suffering in order to act? Is that always preceded? The Dalai Lama believes it always precedes it at the beginning. But when you become a more experienced practitioner, that's no longer a necessary or likely step. But the action is. And of course, how does concern differ from the empathetic feeling? I don't think we know the answer to that one. Is it an emotion, a motivation, or an aspiration? The aspiration is what the Buddhists are talking about more. And what is the result of the experience that every one of us have when we watch television every day and we see the suffering of people all over the world that we can't do anything about right at that time? That's not what human existence was like. I had the privilege of living in a Stone Age culture in the late 60s. And in that culture, you spent your whole time with 200 people, a whole lifetime. And if someone was suffering, you not only knew about it, you could do something, or you could know that there was nothing you could do. But it wasn't as removed as the suffering is now. There must be some entertainment value, because television won't show things that it doesn't think entertains people and causes you not to switch channels. And so seeing suffering and misery, big feature of the nightly news, but is one that we can't do much about. So if this is the model, when I thought about my own role as a parent, of course my children were feeling pain or mental anguish. I wanted to alleviate it, but I'm calling that proximal compassion. But most of the time that wasn't what I was doing. I was trying to prevent suffering. Wear a helmet when you ride your bicycle. They're not suffering now. I just don't want them to suffer if they have a bicycle accident. Don't use hard drugs, and here's the reasons why. That's, again, it's not proximal, it's distal. Two different types. Most of what I think, at least I did as a parent, was distal. And distal is more cognitive and probably more educable than proximal. So let's look at familial compassion. The compassion you have towards family members, and what determines how strong it is. Is it shared genes? Or is it the amount of physical contact that you have with that person? Or is it the age or helplessness of the target? Sort of at the beginning and end of life, people get pretty helpless. Is that when we feel the most compassion? And when they're out on their own and conquering the world, Do we feel as much compassion towards them? Or is it the caregiver's upbringing and personality? Or is it how good they are at social forecasting and anticipating problems? Well, of course, it's probably all of these, and in differing amounts for different contexts and different people. So let me now turn to the question of whether familial compassion is an emotion. It certainly has some of the characteristics of an emotion. All of those you can read, so I don't need to go through them. I think the only one that you may not be familiar with is this idea that when you are in the midst of an emotion, there's a refractory period in which all of your attention is focused on what fits that emotion. And information that's irrelevant is ignored. Even information that might disconfirm the basis for the emotion is largely ignored, at least for a period. So we find this in familial, and we find this in emotion. But here are two that I don't think we're so certain about. At least I'm not so certain whether there is a distinctive signal. Now, Dr. Keltner, who I'm very fond of, and some of the students think they have a distinctive signal for compassion, but I remain agnostic. It was Ritchie I first heard use the term agnostic about a scientific issue. It's really very applicable, you know? Not that I'm an atheist. I'm not certain it's wrong. I'm just not certain it's right. I don't know. But here are two things that are crucial to familial compassion and are not found in emotion. The target is constrained. I can be afraid of anything or anybody or any event. Familial compassion is focused on a member of the family. And it's a constrained target, and also it's focused on a particular state, the suffering of that member of the family. Highly constrained, totally different than emotions which have generality in terms of target. And, as I proposed to you earlier, emotions can be either constructive or destructive, but familial compassion is only constructive, at least in motivation. So two ways in which it doesn't. So let me summarize what I've been telling you so far. I've talked about the different kinds of suffering. I've talked about different kinds of compassionate responses. I've talked about the immediacy. Is it proximal or distal? So now let me elaborate on the target. I've already talked about familial, but the next type of compassion is towards familiars. My neighbors, my friends, the people I know. They're not members of my family. Actually, I know Richie so well that sometimes it's hard for me to remember that he's not a member of my family, but he's highly familiar. Okay? And that can be the target of compassion. But let's look down to the next one, because this is the key to the survival of the planet as we know it, which is compassion towards strangers. And of course, the Buddhists are concerned with not being human, being sentient would be the name of the conference if it was strictly operating from a Buddhist point of view. Anybody who can feel, any organism that can feel pain is the target of compassion from a Buddhist viewpoint. Now, the issue with stranger compassion is who's encompassed in stranger compassion and what determines it. Now, do I only feel compassion towards strangers in the Bay Area? My landsmen? Or is it members of my own country, all Americans? Or is it all human beings? And that's what I would call global compassion. All human beings. Now, so it differs in the target or extent or scope, but it also differs in centrality. Compassion can be an occasional act, Or it can be periodic. You know, every Christmas time I make my charitable donations, or maybe I do it every month, as my local public radio encourages me to do. Or maybe it's what determines my occupation, where I live, how I'm spending my time. It's totally central in determining my life. And we know it is like that for some people. Why is it like that for some people, but not all people? There are some people, as much as we have been able to find out, which isn't a hell of a lot, but there are some people that doesn't seem to be anything unique about their upbringing or their demographic characteristics. And yet they're up at the top. They're concerned about all human beings, and it's central, it's organizing their life. How can we understand that? Is it a gift? We don't say, why can't everybody be an Olympic athlete? Why can't everybody be a Jascha Heifetz? We recognize that some people have a gift and most people don't. Is that what global compassion is? A gift that's just given to some people? I don't know the answer to that, but that would be discouraging. If we don't believe that the planet's going to really survive as we know it, unless global compassion becomes more the norm than the exception. But here's another possibility. It might be inherent in all people, but requires certain experiences to be activated. And there's a lot of research on toddlers of late that shows as early as between the ages of 2 or sometimes a little younger, toddlers will, without prompting, act to console a stranger, a strange adult who seems to be in distress, or a strange toddler. It's there at the beginning. In virtually everyone who's been studied, nearly everyone, what happens to it? Why isn't it there when they become adults? It is only in some, not in everyone as it is in the toddlers. What's intervening? Now let me mention one other thing. I'll go as far out on a limb as I can see, which is to propose that when we act compassionately, it's innately enjoyable. It feels good. Not because we think better of ourselves. That's a different type of good feeling. Not because others will admire us. It just feels good, like sugar tastes good. You don't have to learn it. It feels good. And it feels good when we see someone else act compassionately. It's inspiring. So why don't we have more of it? I can't give you the answer. I can give you the suspicion. And the suspicion is that what intervenes is entertainment that emphasizes competition, not collaboration, zero-sum games approaches to life, the pleasures of defeating another. That's what most of the game world is. And kids spend more time with the game world and watching TV, where they see similar stuff, than anything else. So could we change that? Could it be just as entertaining to see people rescuing each other, helping each other, collaborating and cooperating? And would that strengthen what's there in the toddler? Well, that's a question I leave you with. And it's a question that I hope everyone will address. All the people in this audience who want to do research, these are a lot of research questions. I'm about to publish an e-book called Moving Towards Global Compassion, and it ends with 100 questions, of which you've only heard 15. Okay? There are lots of things that we could get answers to that might help us move more directly to that. Thank you very much.